Good evening, one and all. We welcome you to the international webinar series on holistic health, well-being, and sustainable development. On occasion of World Social Work Month, World Health Month, World Press Freedom Month 2022, commemorating Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, nation celebrating 75 years of independence in collaboration with Sri Holistic Health Foundation India and Sri Research Institute and Center for Art, Sciences and Wellbeing. We welcome you all to the international webinar series. Before we start our session, let's take the blessings from Almighty.
कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोऽस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणम् आरोग्यं धनसम्पदः
With the blessings of Almighty, we shall continue to today's session. Yeah, due to some technical reasons, our speaker is unable to connect today. So what we'll do is we will take up a different topic today on disaster management, basics of disaster management. Myself, I will take the session. We'll see in the meanwhile if the speaker joins. It's fine. Otherwise, we'll continue with the session. So, what is disaster management? Let's look into the basic terms, meanings of basic terms, and then we shall move on to various aspects of disaster and disaster management. Okay. Disaster. What is disaster? An event, natural or human made, sudden or progressive, which impacts with such severity that the affected community has to respond by taking exceptional measures. So it can be a community, society, state, or nation, or maybe couple of nations that has been affected with disaster. Now, what is hazard? Let's look into the different terminologies of disaster management. Hazard are defined as a physical phenomena that poses a threat to the people, structures, or economic assets, and which may cause a disaster. So, hazards are those things, those physical phenomena, those pose a threat to the people, structures, infrastructure, economic assets, and all the living and non-living beings on the given area or on the given state or nation. So what hazards can be? It can be earthquakes, it can be floods, it can be tsunami, etc. All are hazards, and we can prevent them from becoming disasters. These hazards can be prevented. And why do we need to prevent these disasters? And what is the impact of these disasters? So, disasters can cause loss of lives, loss to property and infrastructure, damage to livelihood, economic loss, environmental damage that it can create to the water bodies, flora, fauna, and the socio-economical, cultural, and psychological effects that creates during the disaster and after the disaster. So, considering these impacts of disasters is very important to understand what is disaster and what are the different hazards that can turn into disasters and the need to prevent the disasters because of the kind of impact that disasters is creating. Now, so what are different categories of disasters? Now we have seen broadly what is a disaster and what kind of disasters. Let's look into the categories, broad categories of disasters. Uh, it can be water and climate related disasters, geologically related disasters, chemical and industrial and nuclear disasters, accident related disasters, biologically related disasters. These are different types of disasters which has been broadly categorized by the high powered committees. So, what does, which hazard comes into which category? So, first, let's look into the water and climate disasters. So, what all come into this category, which are related to water and climate? So, what are the different hazards in this category? So, floods, cyclones, tornadoes, hailstorms, cloudburst, heat wave and cold wave, snow avalanches, droughts, sea erosion, thunder and lightning, tsunami, all part of water and climate related disasters. Now, let's move on to the second category or the other category of related disasters, that is geologically related disasters. So in this, we have landslides, mud flows, earthquakes, dam failures, dam bursts, mine fires are all part of the geological related disasters. And let's look into other category of disasters. These are chemical, industrial, and nuclear disasters. These are purely man-made disasters which occur due to either failure of the infrastructure or machinery or due to human errors or negligence. So there are various categories of disasters. In that, this is the most preventable disaster because mostly the disasters happen due to human error and negligence, due to lack of proper maintenance and proper surveillance and proper checks. These disasters continue to happen, and we have seen many such man-made disasters, especially chemical Bhopal gas tragedy, and many other disasters we have seen, which has taken so much of lives. So, such incidences can be prevented with proper maintenance, checks, and surveillance of the industries. And we have other category, accident related disasters. In these, we have forest fires, urban fires, mine flooding, oil spill, major building collapses, serial bomb blast or bomb blast, festival related disasters, and electrical disasters and fires, air, road, and rail accidents, boat capsizing, village fire, all fire and accident related uh, disasters come into this category. And we have another category that is biological related disasters. In these, we have biological disasters, epidemics, pandemics, endemics, pest attacks, cattle epidemics, food poisoning. All these come under biologically related disasters. Now, having looked at various disasters, we are able to identify which hazard comes into which category and which can become a disaster. So we can prevent uh, these hazards becoming disasters by proper surveillance, proper maintenance, and being aware of the facts that hazards can turn into disasters if not maintained properly. Now, the amount of disasters, uh, having seen about different disaster types, now let's look into the statistics of how much disaster, what kind of disaster or what type of disaster has created a huge impact till now statistically based on the available data. We could see that hydro and meteorological disaster types have created the maximum impact, around 75 to 80% of the damage or the impact that was created by hydro and meteorological disaster. And the next category, that is somewhere around 10 to 15%, is geological disasters that has created huge impact apart from hydrometeorological disasters. And the least category falls into biological disasters, that is somewhere around 10 to 15%. These are approximates, the exact figures lies in between them. And now, having seen what is disaster and what is hazard and different types of hazards and their categories and the impact they are creating and the amount of impact that was created in the nearest past. Now, let's see the different aspects of disaster management. Now, when we see the that is, who can be affected severely by the hazard or disaster. So those people or properties or places need to be under constant surveillance as per the available data, and capacity building has to take place by estimating the risk, calculating the risk, and accordingly capacity building has to take place to address the vulnerability issue. So what can be done there? We can create awareness on the situation about hazards, about how hazards can be turned into disasters, and what could be done at the time of disaster, before disaster, at the time of disaster, and post disaster, after disaster. So that training can be imparted in a timely manner so that the preparedness for the disaster can be achieved, so that we can minimize the loss of lives and also the property. Now, uh, we, the governments, have a disaster policy, public policy on disasters, and our attitude towards disaster was basically uh, it's wrath of nature or anger of God. It was initially thought it so. It was natural disaster or it's a natural calamity. But most of the disasters nowadays are happening are, most of them or all of them, we can say, are human made disasters. The climate change and whatever we see, floods, droughts, all are due to improper development or unsustainable, unproductive exploitation of natural resources and resources around us that are causing, creating different disasters. And government intervention can be very limited towards the relief and rehabilitation assistance, apart from the efforts that it is creating in awareness due to its limited capacity of workforce. So what is required here? The community participation, community engagement, community awareness is much required because they are the first responders and they are the first victims. So they need to be awareness training that needs to be imparted, that is being actively done even in the time of COVID through online, offline, in all the modes can be done. Government has been very effective in doing. There should be a community engagement, constant community engagement, which will always keeps us proactive, both the governments and the communities, to be prepared for the disasters and preventing hazards, turning them into disasters. Now let's see past disasters, which has created a great impact on the nation. So in 1993, we are just discussing about few recent examples. Latur earthquake in 1993. What happened in 9,405 approximately, around 10,000, can be around 9,000 to 9,500. 1 million people were dead and lives were lost, and around 1 million houses were damaged and 8 million people were affected. That's why we call these as mega disasters. These were of recent past. And Orissa super cyclone in 1999. There also approximate casualties, loss of life was around 10,000 plus, and around 2 million houses were damaged, and 15 million people were affected. And in 2001, in Gujarat earthquake, around 13,000 plus have lost their lives, and around 1 to 2 million houses were damaged, and around 12 million people were affected. And in 2004, Indian Ocean tsunami, around 12,000 plus people lost their lives. And 3.5 million houses were damaged, and 18 million people were affected. And Jammu and Kashmir earthquake in 2005, around 1,300 people has lost their lives, and around 6,000 to 6,500 people were injured. Around 5 billion economic loss has occurred due to these earthquakes. So these are few examples of the kind of impact that disasters can create. That's why there is an immediate need to address this, to bring awareness and for capacity building and community preparedness for these hazards and disasters. So what could be the causes? One is this hazard risk vulnerability mapping, which is in the process, but still there is no foolproof method. Still, there are much efforts being put by the governments, but still a lot need to be done. And inadequate early warning system. Sometimes due to technology limitations or due to human capacity building, these early warning systems sometimes, most of the times they were successful, but sometimes we still see the chance of failures in the early warning system, and absence of techno-legal regime for safe building, and poor community awareness and preparedness, and environmental degradation, and developmental projects which are creating new disasters due to its impact on forests and water bodies, and inadequate relief management or insufficient. So all these are major concerns or lacunae in the system, which is creating or contributing to the impact of the disasters. Now, what are the initiatives that has been taken by the government in brief? The government appointed high power committee and shifted from relief-centric approach to multidisciplinary, multi-sectorial, holistic approach. 11th five-year plan 2007 to 2012 outlined a multi-pronged strategy for total risk management for sustainable development. And states were advised to have disaster management plans and schemes so that they can tackle the disasters effectively. A roadmap was created on disaster management, and development of disaster management framework were formulated, and enactment of Disaster Management Act 2005 took place. So with this, there was an official department that is dedicated to the disaster management, and the protocols, rules, guidelines were given with this act. There are much in detail, various aspects, but due to time constraints, I am not taking up everything in detail. We'll see if time permits or some other day also. If not today, we can discuss in detail. And there are other aspects of disaster or disaster management. Like we have seen, there is a pre-disaster, disaster, and post-disaster phases of disaster. Pre-disaster is before the disaster happens, at the time of disaster, and after the disaster happens, that is post-disaster. So, what goes in pre-disaster phase? It deals with impending hazards. As we have seen, there are hazards that can be turned into disaster. So first we have to deal with them, and which are impending hazards, and prevention of hazards or turning hazards into disasters, mitigation, both structural and non-structural mitigation, and preparedness, state of readiness. So we have to make everyone prepared and ready for dealing with the hazard and disaster. That also, preparedness, we can have uh, early warning systems, that is timely dissemination of warning, and we can see evaluation from time to time how the hazard or disaster is going to create an impact and what kind of impact it can create, and accordingly we have to keep warning the people and informing the people around. Now, during disaster, what needs to be done? And after disaster, what has to be done? Now, even during disaster also, we need to ensure or see that the impact is less and loss of life is less and loss of damage to property is minimized by prevention, mitigation, and preparedness. And we have to ensure timely alerts or warnings to the beneficiaries or to the stakeholders. At the same time, after disaster, that is, once the disaster has happened, passed away, then there is a disaster situation. We need to deal with that crisis situation. First thing is response. The first few minutes or hours are the golden hours. That is where we can save a lot of lives, property, when properly taken care and addressed to. Then temporary restoration. If there is some damage that has caused, which can be immediately addressed and repaired so that it can prevent further damage or greater loss of life and property. So immediately, like infrastructure or power restoration, telecom restoration, of maybe roads, rails, bridges, all need to be immediately, if any damage has occurred, then it has to be immediately restored so that the support and the help and the communication can be effectively reached and managed. And search and rescue operation should also immediately take place. So technical skill and unskilled, first aid, psychological first aid, and all this has to immediately start. the time of disaster and also after disaster. This will ensure that immediate relief, first aid will reach the persons who require it. And as we see, this is a crisis situation and we need to deal with the emotions, psychological aspects of the individuals. Those are being affected and those are affected by the disaster. So psychological first aid is also very important aspect with respect to mental health. And immediately the relief measures should also follow as per the relief guidelines. And there should be a minimum standard. Definitely we cannot ensure that we can provide all the best facilities there because of limitations. But a minimum standard or a minimum quality of services should be ensured that so that their lives and dignity is protected and promoted. And finally, recovery, reconstruction, and rehabilitation. Now, it's very important to recover from the disaster. So, long term funding or adequate planning might be required in the most severe cases. Otherwise, moderate funding and planning is definitely required, irrespective of whether it may be short term or long term. And reconstruction. If the damage that has caused to the infrastructure has to be reconstructed or rebuilt, and rehabilitation also should happen simultaneously so that the affected people, animals, and all other stakeholders should be immediately rehabilitated and they should be provided with adequate food, water, sanitation, health, and medical relief. Not only that, apart from that, the other basic necessities are also to be met. So when we take care of all these aspects, then we can address the disaster in a better way. Now, let's briefly look at the National Disaster Management Structure. Under the Government of India, uh, you know, we have planning the various department or ministries that fall under the disaster purview. Was the Planning Commission, Ministry of Home Affairs, and other ministries and departments, and armed forces. All coordinate with the National Disaster Management Authority, that is NDMA. And apart from that, Cabinet Committee on Security, Cabinet Committee on Management of Natural Calamities, High Power Committee or High Level Committee, National Crisis Management Committee are all in coordination, collaboration under Government of India, works with National Disaster Management Authority at national level and also state management levels. Under that, we have National Institute of Disaster Management, NIDM, and National Disaster Response Force, NDRF, and National Disaster Mitigation Resource Center. And these all provide guidance, support to the state and central, state and union territory government disaster management authorities. At a national level, we have a national authority, and every state has its own advice to have its own disaster management departments and committees. Now, at the state level, we have State Disaster Response Force, department dealing with disaster management, and ministries and departments, civil defense, and police, fire services, home guards, etc. at the state level. and even districts are advised and promoted to have disaster management units. That is district management authorities, relief reserves, departments, civil defense, police, fire services, and local authorities in coordination with the state authorities as well as the national authorities. This is the basic structure. We are not getting into much detail. Now, we can see various challenges apart from the kind of impact that can create. We have risks to not only to the people but also the risk to ecosystems. So what happened due to this magnitude of disasters? There is an increased incidence of natural calamity, an increase in stress to human and as well as other life forms like animals, plants, etc. An increased probability of transboundary issues. And Himalayan glaciers are melting and flows into the Indus and Ganga at risk because of this climate change and rising temperatures and variability in monsoons affecting crop production and erosion of coastal areas due to sea level rise and extreme weather conditions. Coastal areas are getting slowly submerged into the ocean. We have seen recent IPCC report that has alarmed us. I mean, the entire world, that most of the, even in India also, almost 16 coastal cities or places are going to be completely submerged if the climate change is not addressed. Not only just in India, but across the world. It has also alarmed that many countries might also get submerged into the ocean, those who are islands and coastal areas, which are just above the sea level. So, because of this sea level rise, because the north and south poles are melting and even glaciers are melting, so the amount which are stored in the glaciers form in the ice, those are getting melted and that water flows into the ocean. It causes the rise in the sea levels. So that is creating an impact on the coastal areas. Because if this rising temperatures, these poles and glaciers are melting. So this is creating scarcity in the fresh water. We know the fresh water comes from the glaciers and we have very little percentage of fresh water available, and most of the ocean water is salty water which cannot be directly consumed. So the fresh water resources are also depleting very fast. So these are the climate change impacts. Even the INCCA report has found, IPCC report also has highlighted. Now we are seeing warmer seasons. You know, the temperatures, recent temperatures have touched 50 degrees in some parts. So the temperatures are rising and average temperature increase would be 2 degrees as predicted, and at some extreme ranges it can be 1 to 4 degrees increase, and that can create even more warmer seasons. And increased annual precipitation due to lower frequency of rainy days, there will be increased annual precipitation and cyclonic disturbances due to lower frequency and increased intensity, increased risk of storm surges. And freshwater supply, as we have already discussed, high variability predicted in water yields from 50% increase to 40 to 50% reduction, and 10 to 30% increased risk of floods, increased risk of droughts. All these are due to climate change impacts. See how climate change is impacting each and every person in the world. So we need to be consciously aware that we need to ensure that forest deforestation is not happening and it is being stopped, and we should look for alternative uh, resources, alternative strategies to reduce the rise of sea levels, and sea levels are rising at 1.3 mm per year on average, and it may be statically, but it might be even more, and these are accelerating year by year, month by month, due to human activities. It's all due to human activities. And forests and natural ecosystems, if we see that what climate change has impacted, is increased net primary productivity, shifting forest borders, species mix, negative impact on livelihoods and biodiversity, and human health also uh, got impacted, higher morbidity and mortality from heat, stress, and vector and waterborne diseases, and expanded transmission window for malaria, and it has impacted the agricultural productivity also, a sharp fall in land productivity of 17%, and general decrease in productivity of crops. However, due to management, cash crops continue to increase because of various exploitation, of natural resources, and through use of fertilizers and other uh, essentials. At some places we can see high yield, but it is also impacting, and crops earlier grown in the lower or mid Himalayan regions are now grown at higher altitudes, because now we see this snow is melting off, glaciers are melting, Himalayans are melting. So now there is no snow over there, even to the higher altitudes, or sometimes there is very less amount of snowfall also. And marine fisheries are likely to be impacted as there are spawning shifts to higher altitudes. All these are impacting the ecosystems and different aspects of living and non-living beings. And what is the relationship between disasters and development? So, are these development activities are creating, promoting disasters? Yes. How? We have seen due to human activities and development activities, the climate change is being accelerated. Temperatures are rising due to greenhouse and gas emissions, carbon gas emissions, methane gas emissions, and due to animal farming, excessive, like we are consuming more meat and meat products. So how do we raise these animals? We need to produce, right? We need to feed them. Again, we are lacking. Lot of people in the world are dying of hunger deaths. You know how many people are not even having a single meal, and we are using the produces for again feeding animals, and that animals we are taking as food. So total waste of food resources, which could have better addressed to the hunger needs of the people of the world. But what we are doing, we are using them irresponsibly without having concern to our fellow brothers and sisters of the world. They are dying of hunger, and we are using them to feed animals which are to be consumed as food again. So the irrational use of resources that is causing, animal farming creates lot of carbon dioxide emissions and methane. Methane is more impactful, more dangerous than carbon emissions. And the more we consume meat and meat products, the more we are contributing to the climate change. The only quick remedy for this is stop consuming meat products. You will be contributing a lot to the climate change. And be vegan so that you are contributing to the climate change. Occasionally you can have it because it in the larger interest that is creating a lot of gases emission and lot of and do you know how much water is required to grow 1 kg of paddy, 1 kg of wheat, 1 kg of cereals? And do you know how much a cattle or a goat or a cow or a chicken needs? So these are different statistics that we need to be consciously aware. If we think that, yeah, these will not impact us, then we are wrong. That is what creating more impact on us. So we need to be very conscious of what we are eating. It's not that we should eat only vegetarian, we should eat only non-vegetarian. That is a different aspect of our preferences, of our likings or dislikes. But what it is creating to us and what it is creating to the world and what it is creating to the climate is more important rather than our dislikes. Tomorrow, if temperature rises at 55, then half of the population will vanish. And if sea levels continue to rise to another 2-3 centimeters, what can happen? Many coastal areas will be submerged. And these kind of is that more important or we consuming meat is more important? We have to decide. Now these are few examples, and we can say our human activities are directly proportional to the amount of disasters. And all the disasters, thus we can say, all are human disasters, and now there is no natural disaster. Whatever disasters are happening are entirely due to cause of human activities, our irrational activities, our irrational, unsustainable development practices that are happening is contributing to the climate change. And we are paying for that and we are suffering from it. So what is the immediate thing that we can do is be responsible, reuse, do not exploit the natural resources, and be vegan and stop consuming meat products so that animal farming will reduce. That will reduce methane gas emission and the consumption of food which otherwise can be used to feed the people who are dying with hunger. And across the world there are many people who are being affected, who are undernutrition, or malnutrition, or overnutrition due to selective availability of foods. They are not getting proper diet. So if we all are feeding animals with the precious cereals and food samples which are being produced, and lot of deforestation happens because more the animals are farmed, more the food requirements. That is, we need more land to cultivate. That means more deforestation. Again, forests are depleted. See, you with one small preference of consuming meat by us is creating so much impact on the environment. It is causing deforestation. It is causing more agricultural activity. It is creating more pollution. It is exploiting more natural resources. And it's creating a lot of pollution in the process, emission of methane gases, carbon gases, and a lot. Now, who is responsible for it? Just one preference, food preference, just shift to vegan, and you see, you will save all these things. You will prevent all these things. So there are many such simple things which we can do that really can help our planet, can help us and everyone on the planet. If we still continue, nothing will happen. The same we will continue to face temperature rises, and we are going to face in another 50 or 100 years, half of the population will become extinct. That is going to happen because if we don't take even many reports and many committees have also warned us that if we don't, even United Nations has declared this decade as decade of restoration. If we are in 2022, in next 80 years, if we don't restore, already we have done damage to the nature beyond restoration. And within next 80 years, at least we do not reach the minimum standard of restoration or the minimum goals of restoration. That's the end of it. Now it will go beyond restoration and disasters will be a daily affair. Now, every day we have to manage the disaster. Disaster management will be part of life management now. So now let's all consciously take a decision whether we shall accelerate the climate change, whether we accelerate the disasters, or contribute to the disaster prevention and contribute to the disaster management. First thing is what we can personally do: have vegetarian diet, avoid as much as we can meat products, meat consumption. That is the very first thing. A small change in food preference can save us a lot, can save our planet a lot from disasters. And next thing is having sustainable practice. Reuse of ban of complete single-use plastic and reuse of multiple reuse of various products and conscious, rational use, constructive use of, judicial use of resources. Let's not think this is getting for 1 rupee or 10 rupees. It's very cheap and we can just throw over. And we can see a lot of pollution now with the ease of use. You know how much masks or disposable products are being discarded daily. It is mounting to tons and tons, millions of tons. Where this all go? Into the ocean. Now oceans are filled with lots of disposables and waste. Almost half of the ocean is filled with all the waste. So that kind of impact that we have created, that kind of waste we have generated with the uh, human activity. We are the most notorious criminals on the planet who has created such a disaster, such an thing. If nature has to bring us to trial, we will be having the most heinous punishment which we never imagined of. So what kind of people we are, what kind of decisions we are taking, what kind of practices we are following. We need to rethink of everything to manage this, to prevent these hazards and disasters. If not, we will continue to pay for that and we will continue to suffer for that. The only conscious decision is with us. So we have just 8 years left to restore everything back or to the minimum level. Otherwise, we will go beyond restoration and even God will not be able to help us because of the amount of atrocity or the abuse that we have done to nature. We are going to pay for that. Now, to avoid that, it is in our hands, as I suggested, or as everyone is suggesting. Go vegan so that animal farming will come down and reuse, recycle the products so that less production that will lessen the exploitation of natural resources, pollution of natural and artificial resources, and proper judicial consumption, be responsible for disposables. And we see even this Sunday we are celebrating, I mean on 28th Saturday we are celebrating uh, menstrual day now. And apart from that, we are using, in this context, I would like to take a point from that. Diapers, even small children, infants, to old age people who are unable to get out of bed, have to manage everything. Everyone is using disposable diapers. Do you know where they go into? Ultimately, they end up in the oceans. And you know, if you don't dispose a diaper from your house for 1 week, you have to be out of your homes. Yes. So these untreated or unsanitized disposed diapers or sanitary pads are creating a lot of impact to the environment and also causing an hygiene issue not only to humans but also to animals and other uh, beings. So we need to have sustainable practices in that also. Reduce the consumption of sanitary pads or these diapers. We have to be very conscious. Earlier, where sustainable medicine practices were used cloth instead of disposable. Now we thought it's convenience of use. We are disposing, but where that disposal will go, where that waste will go, is ending up in the oceans, right? If it is burnt, it will create more impact and it will create more harm. So we cannot burn them also. See, we are creating such products which are creating harm to ourselves and we are using them irrationally without any concern to ourselves, our environment. And these are ending up in oceans and everywhere in the landfills and the municipality people, sanitation people who carry them, you know, with the bare hands or with the minimum, they are being exposed. They are also human beings like us. So we need to think of all these activities which are causing, and that's why the relationship between the disasters and the human activity and development. It's all because of us. There are no natural disasters. All are because of human activities. So we are creating our own disasters and suffering from it. So we need to understand this, that we are the source for the disasters. We are the source for hazards and we need to act upon. It is the high time that we need to act. Otherwise, even if we act also, we will not be able to create major impact. Now, so what we can do, uh, what development is doing now, we have just discussed few examples. We can discuss many such examples and it will take months, years or together also, because such a huge mistakes we are committing that we every day, if you see, when you wake up till you go to bed, how much of wastage you are creating, how much of unsustainable practices we are adopting, how much of irrational use of natural and artificial resources we are coming. Just one day make a note of what you are doing from morning to evening, and next day you do a review. You will understand how much waste you are generating, how much heat you are producing, how much damage you are causing to the planet and the environment around. That will give you an insight for everyone, not just you, me, and everyone. That is very important. So development is increasing the vulnerability. Development can reduce vulnerability by having sustainable practices, but there is no such thing as sustainable because every practice is either exploiting the resources or causing harm. Now, And disasters, in turn, what is happening? You are engaging into more and more development activities, and that's how more and disasters are happening. And with that disasters, again you are having a setback in development. So what happened? You are going forward, disaster is taking you backward. It is just moving forward, coming backward, moving forward, coming backward. In the process, you are losing lives, and you are using the all the developmental efforts, resources, you are losing. So this is not at all a sustainable development. The sustainable development is such a way that disasters should be minimized, hazards should be minimized, and should be properly addressed. And disasters should provide development opportunities, like by planning, by looking at our mistakes, we need to restructure ourselves so that disasters are minimized. Now we need to rethink, as we said, from food stack. Personally, it should start with everyone. It's not that someone will come and do something. Everyone has to contribute, and everyone is causing uh, this climate change. No one is exempted. So we all are responsible for that. Let's take accountability, let's take responsibility, and today take pledge that we are not going to consume meat products, or we are going to minimize the meat consumption as much as possible, and we are going to reuse and we are going to use judicially the resources, and we are going to uh, uh, discard single use products, and we are going to adopt multiple use products. Even with the sanitary pads, we can go with menstrual cups, or alternatives are there. We need to look for alternatives which are very much affordable and practicable. It's high time that we discard all the disposables or single use products, and we need to move to multiple use by recycling, reusing it. Otherwise, we'll just go beyond the restorations, and there is nothing will be in our hands. This is very important. And we have Sendai Framework 2015, which will apply to the risk of small and large scale, frequent and infrequent, sudden and slow onset disasters caused by natural or man-made hazards, as well as related environmental, technological, and biological hazards and risks. It aims to guide the multi-hazard management of disaster risk in development at all levels, as well as within and across the sectors. The substantial reduction of disaster risk and losses in lives, livelihoods, and health, and in economic, physical, social, cultural, and environmental assets of persons, business, communities, and countries. Now, what are four priorities for action? Understanding disaster risk, strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk, investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience, enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response, and to build back better in recovery, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. Now, what are the 7 global targets for them? Substantially reduce global disaster mortality, reduce the number of affected people, reduce direct disaster economic loss, reduce disaster damage to critical infrastructure, and increase the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies, enhance international cooperation to developing countries through adequate and sustainable support to complement their national actions, and implementation of Sendai framework by 2030, substantially increase the availability of and access to multi-hazard early warning systems and disaster risk information and assessments to the people by 2030. Now, what are different mechanisms required in mainstreaming disaster risk reduction in development? First is legal and regulatory mechanisms and institutional mechanism, policies and planning, finance and budgeting, decentralization, capacity building. Now, 15th Finance Commission, Article 280, effective from 1st April 2020 onwards. The Commission recommended the creation of funds for disaster mitigation along with the disaster response, which will now together be called as National Disaster Risk Management Fund. And at this state level, we have State Disaster Risk Management Fund, SDRM. The allocated grants for the National Disaster Research Management, Risk Management Fund is 12,390 crore for 2020-21, and recommended grants for State Disaster Risk Management Fund is 28,983 crores for 2020-2021. So allocations for SDRMF will be further subdivided. The total fund, response and relief 40%, recover and reconstruction 30%, mitigation 20%, capacity building 10%. So these are the various strategies. Now it's up to us what decisions we can take. Our decisions, our lifestyle, our food habits are going to reduce, whether they are going to reduce or they are going to contribute or accelerate to the disasters. Now it's time for us to rethink about our practices, our lifestyle, our food habits, so that we can reduce the disasters. So it's up to us now how to respond, how to react to the human activities, to the environment, to the climate change, to have sustainable future for all. If we are unable to restore, what will happen? It will go beyond restoration and it will never be a normal. And day to day, it will be a daily affair that we need to have disaster management. Otherwise, life will become a disaster. So it's very important we rethink, relook about all these aspects and address, behave responsibly, take accountability towards the planet, towards our practices. Hope everyone enjoyed this session. If you have any queries, you can unmute yourself, or you can raise your hand, or you can put it in your chat box. Dear participants, if you have any queries, you can put in chat box or comments or observations. Or you can raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself.
Hi, sir.
Yes, Marina.
Yes, sir. It was very mind-blowing session. First time I'm hearing so much about disaster management, and it's a lot of takeaway session. Lot of for me, it's learning, sir. This new field. I have done just only one time presentation on disaster management. So this is for me learning and lot of informative sessions, sir, and lot of takeaway from me for me how you should eat. At maximum you should eat vegetarian, how you should not waste, how degradation of you said about sanitary napkins, everything. So it's a very takeaway sessions are for me. God bless you, sir, and all the best for your life.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else would like to share your comments? You can raise your hand or you can unmute yourself or you can put in chat box. Okay, if there are no queries, we shall conclude. I will be sharing the feedback form in chat box. Kindly fill up the feedback form. The feedback form has been shared in the chat box. Kindly fill up the feedback form. And in the meanwhile, if you have any queries, comments, observation, you can type in chat box or raise your hand or unmute yourself. And kindly fill up the feedback form. It is mandatory for receiving your certificate. You have 5 minutes for filling up the feedback form, after which we'll be closing the meeting. Quickly fill up the feedback form. Certificate will be provided within 15 working days. On the webinar website, you can visit you can visit the International Webinar Series website. On that, you can find today's date page or link. You can click on that. There you can find the flyer, and just below the flyer, you can see the e-certificate download link. That will be Google Drive link from which you can download certificate. So wait for 15 working days. Generally, we don't take much time. Occasionally, whenever we get some time, as you know, we are also fully occupied in day-to-day activities. So this is an additional activity for us. But still we are managing. Whenever we are getting some time, we are generating the certificates and they are available on the website. And just in case, if you are unable to get certificate, see many, we are getting queries. Many times we see that when you are contacting us, we are participants are not providing proper details and we are not able to help you because daily webinars are happening. When you don't introduce yourself, when you don't provide proper details, we will be not able to check. First thing is, let me explain the process. It may not be the same way, not everyone might be doing, but let me try to explain the process. The first thing is, when some of your dear participants approach us for certificate, first we need to take all your details. Then we have to cross check in the Zoom platform because Zoom daily generates attendance for so every participant, whoever logs in, logs out, will create it will generate a log so that we need to see whether you have attended or not. And even for providing Zoom names also, which is you need to provide the name as it is visible in the Zoom participant list. Sometimes you are giving your full name and the Zoom name is different. So that is also creating a problem for us because while generating the attendance, it will generate on the name as it is visible in the participant list. So if you are having a different name, ensure that before you log into the meeting, after logging, there is no provision to rename. So before logging in, you ensure that your name is properly renamed or typed so that Zoom can automatically create attendance on your name, which on which or by which a certificate can be generated. Most of the times, what is happening is on Zoom, the name is different. What the name you are communicating is different. That is also creating problems and delay in that. In case if you have missed a feedback form or in case you were logged out due to various reasons. So ensure that your names are properly set and you attend the session completely and fill the feedback form, because feedback form from feedback form we pull the names and certificates are generated. So ensure that you are filling the feedback form so that certificates are generated, or in case if you had any difficulty, you contact us immediately, because certain times we are taking the one reason for taking time for generating certificates is in case of any technical issues we can consider. Otherwise, what happens immediately if we cannot generate one certificate for any individual. It is an automatic process and certificates are generated. So what happens is if you miss the certificate, then it will be difficult. If you inform us immediately, we will try to ensure that your name is also accommodated. Otherwise, if you contact us after many days or without proper details, we will be not able to help you, because once generated, we cannot regenerate. So it takes a lot of time and resources, and we are also running short of time and resources. We cannot invest it. Time is precious for everyone. So ensure that we all are organized. Whenever you are contacting, we have put a format. So kindly use the format so that we can help you and you can also help us. And all the certificates we have put in one portal. And there was some problem with the Google sites with Facebook. Not our site, but most of the sites which are on Google sites are being marked as spam. So many times we are unable to share the website link directly. That's the reason initially we were sharing, but now whenever we are trying to post any Google site, not only our site, but even other sites also, it is marking it as spam. That's the reason we have purchased our own domain name. So we are sharing that site link with that message. So you need to visit the website. There you will find International Webinar Series link. You click on that link and then you can navigate to the respective date page where you can download your certificate within 15 working days. This is very simple, but many are unable to find it or follow it, because of which you are unable to find your certificates. So that is the only reason. Just it's very simple. Visit the website, go to the International Webinar Series link, and then visit the respective date for which you have attended and check for your certificate. Minimum eligibility criteria is first you have to be registered, then you have to attend it session, all the sessions, then you need to fill the feedback. If you have met all these criteria, your certificate will be generated and it will be available for download. This is very simple process. Do not complicate this. we are following very liberal in these things also. We are trying to help you, but you should also try to help us, otherwise we will not be able to help you. Hope everyone has filled the feedback form. Now we are closing the webinar. Thank you everyone. Good night. See you tomorrow at the same time with a different topic, different speaker. Take care. Goodbye.